Hey everybody, it's Flark, and welcome to my Dragonflight Tanks PvP star rating prediction video. This one's going to be a little bit different than the other ones, and I think you guys will really like the format. There's just 6 tank specs, and I'm going to take into consideration all forms of PvP. That's 2s, 3s, rated battlegrounds, rated solo shuffle, and remember with that last one, you're only compared on the leaderboard to other people of your spec. So like a tank specialization like Prot Warrior would only be compared to other Prot Warriors. So getting better at Prot Warrior actually has merit in a rated PvP environment, right? So I'm going to take all forms into PvP in consideration, and then I'm going to rate them in 3 different ways, 3 different categories, a star rating for each one. First one, overall damage output. How much pressure can they provide the enemy team? Second, team utility. That's a big one that tanks have, right? So this is CC, off healing, damage mitigation for your team, immunities, right? Any buffs that you can provide your team. Those are all team utility things. So 1 to 5 in that category as well. And finally, ease of play. Remember, this is a more niche thing. Maybe somebody's coming over from PvE and they just want to try out something. Maybe they tank in their raid. Or maybe they're just a new player and they happen to have an affinity for blood DK. Regardless, ease of play will probably matter. You know, certain things are harder to get into than others. Maybe for a hyper-competitive PvPer, they'll all seem easy, but that's not really who this video is for. So, you know, just based on, compared to the other tanks, which one is the easiest, and that will have a star rating for 1 to 5, 5 being the easiest to get into, and 1 being actually maybe kind of difficult. And that's the format. I think this will be super fun. That's how I'm going to handle healers too, just because there's not as many specs, and this should give you a well-rounded informational guidebook into a PvP environment as a tank specialization. So have fun, and let's get right into it. Let's start it off with blood DK, and the first category up there is damage output, and that is a big 5 stars in a PvP environment. I don't think their damage is quite as high in PvE, but they have a tool in PvP that is completely unheard of. This is called Death Chains. It's a PvP talent. You're going to see it right up here. The PvP talent takes all the damage that you do and splits it between 3 targets chained together. So when you cleave, all of them take extra damage, or when you hit somebody really hard, all the other players in the chain take that hit as a percentage of it as well. But it's not just you. It's all damage. That includes your teammates' damage. And in 3s, that's actually a huge portion of your damage just by itself. But in rated battlegrounds, that means every single hit that players are doing to people in this chain gets replicated to other players in the chain. That means you're taking your teammates' damage and making it more damage for you. That is ridiculous. That one PvP talent amplifies their damage so much, but they also have the big death strikes. They also have the shattering bone shield burst shadow damage that they can get, which is great AoE cleave. It's all instant. Their diseases, right? Their rot pressure, it's all instant damage. Blood boil hits. It's very easy to get off, very easy to set up, and you can pair all that with Abomination Limb, which does a lot of damage itself and yanks everybody into your cleave. So not only do they have huge output from that PvP talent and their standard toolkit, they also have ways of getting that output out with grips and A-bomb limb and slows and chains of ice and manual grips. It's just very, very, very easy to do damage output as a blood DK, and that's an easy 5 stars. No questions asked. As for utility, base team utility, it's a little low. What you can mostly do is peel for your teammates very well with chains of ice, grip, double grip, A-bomb limb grip. Maybe you have asphyxiate, right? And that's about all you got. When it comes to off healing, you have almost none. When it comes to team damage mitigation, you don't have anything that the other DKs don't have. You have AMZ, but that's about it. When it comes to immunities, you provide none. When it comes to team buffs, you really don't provide any of that either. You do a lot of output with your team, like I said, from death chains, but that's not really making them any tankier, or giving their cooldowns back faster or anything like that, right? So team utility for blood DK, unfortunately, relative to the other tanks, is an easy 1 star. Your peels are really good, but most tank specs have a lot of peels, and for the other 4 categories, you got nothing. You don't really have any way to do that. As for ease of play, I swear, that is just a 5 stars. Blood DK rotation is very easy to get into. It's very clear what you're trying to do. You're trying to build Death Strike stacks and then press Death Strike. And because Death Strike is your main damaging single target ability, and it's your main heal, and it's your main physical damage absorb, you can effectively do your rotation. And while you're doing it, you're also healing and staying alive. So it's very difficult for you to get punished for going too aggressive because your aggression tops you, right? So it's easy to get into. A-Bomb Limb, again, will yank them all in. So it won't be hard to get your cleave off. You have a lot of just natural passive cleave. Heart Strike just cleaves. Blood Boil just cleaves. And then it applies the disease that just keeps doing damage. Your cooldown management is very easy. And you have a lot of ways to get out of crowd control effects, making it even easier for you to just keep staying aggressive. You have Icebound Fortitude and Anti-Magic Shell providing immunity. And removal, in the case of IBF, 2 CC effects. Lichborn does the same thing as well. So you can really stay aggressive, get pressure out, and do your healing. And since you don't have a lot of team utility, there's nothing really to work on for like making macros to target your teammates and finding out when is the best time to do that without overlapping your cooldowns with theirs. Blood DK ease of play has got to be 5 stars. One of the easiest tanks to get into. Next, moving on to Prot Warrior, and for damage output, unfortunately in a PvP environment, that's just 2 stars. They don't really have the raw cleave that Blood DK has. They don't have a PvP talent nearly as impactful. Their damage output just overall is pretty soft. And because it's all physical damage as well, remember they're going right into armor, so against melee, they don't really have anything to help with the rot effects or help with the magic damage. That can be applied from certain other tank specs. We'll get into that, of course. Prot Paladin and Guardian also fit this bill, and Vengeance even does as well. But Prot Warrior just doesn't have a lot of answers for raw pad, for output, for big cleave. It's really just a low damage spec in PvP. So unfortunately, output for Prot Warrior is just a 2 stars. As for team utility, though, that's a 5 stars. See, it's not all bad, Prot Warriors. That's an easy 5 stars. They have AoE Demo Shout, Demoralizing Shout, where it does a 20% damage reduction with a PvP talent to an entire team, effectively, because the range is very big. They have Bodyguard that soaks half, well, 40%, but nearly half the physical damage that a player takes, and it gives them more damage when they soak that physical damage. That's crazy. They have Intervene to soak even more damage and provide damage reduction for your team. They have Big Rally, so you can give your teammates extra health, of course, in a pinch. They even have Fear, a long Fear from a talent. And Stormbolt, they have good peels. They have good damage reductions. They have good tools to keep your team alive. They are a absolute 5 star. Where they have all the types of peels that a Blood DK could have, especially with like a spammable root and charge root and decent slows and piercing howl, right? They have these peels, but then they have all the other stuff too. So that's an easy 5 stars for team utility as a Prot Warrior. That is what you're really bringing to the table, especially in RBGs when you can just put that Demo Shout on more players. As for ease of play, no, I don't think so. I think that's 2 stars again. Again, you have to make macros for Intervene for multiple players, for Bodyguard for multiple players. You have to keep that upkeep. You can't let them get away from you where the Bodyguard drops. You need to always be in range so you can intervene back to them. You got to make sure when you use your Fear that it doesn't break. You got to keep your uptime on your debuffs. And all the while, you have to be using your rotation, and your rotation is not quite as immortality granting as Blood DK's is, right? So you might be a little susceptible to getting killed as a result of tanks taking 60% extra damage in PvP. So if their rotation doesn't quite provide the survivability that some of the other tank specs do, then you actually can rot to death from all these classes doing a lot of magical damage, ignoring your armor that does 60% more damage. That means you can take some big hits, a big Star Surge to the face for 70k or more, right? It's kind of scary. So unfortunately, ease of play with all that you have to manage on a Prot Warrior is rewarding. As far as team utility goes, you've got some of the best, but it's a difficult spec to get a hang of. 2 stars. Next up, we have the other protection spec. That's Protection Paladin, and their damage output right there in the middle with 3 stars. They only have that because of Holy Shield, which you can see right over here, and that allows them to block spells, but also whenever they block, they deal damage. So when you're getting hit by a lot of people, and maybe in a 3s or an RBG when you're standing in the middle of all the cleave, you actually do a ton of damage right back to them. And your Mastery increases your block chance, meaning they can get even more damage by increasing their block and attack power, both from the same stat, Mastery. And that does give them a lot of output, especially the more targets that there are. That said, their overall rotation just doesn't do as much damage as the rest of the specs, and their PvP talents are all for team utility, not for damage like Death Chains, right? So, Prot Paladin, just right there in the middle of the pack. If they're getting focused, they can do top damage in a short window if they get a ton of blocks. And if they're not, their rotation really is kind of lackluster. Maybe it would have been closer to 2 or 1 stars. But that's Prot Paladin for damage output. As for team utility, 5 big stars. They even had their healing nerfed in a PvP environment. Word of Glory does not heal your teammates in PvP lobbies as much as it would outside of them. That's because their healing was so oppressive. But they still have Word of Glory, albeit less healing from that. They have Flash of Light. They have Blessing of Sack. They have Blessing of Spell Warden to make you immune to all magical effects. They have Blessing of Protection to make you all immune to all physical effects. They have Queens to make you immune to all effects. They have Hodge. They have Blind. They have Rep. They have CC. They have immunity toolkits. They have team utility. They define team utility for tank specs, and that's why they've been a point of contention for a long time as far as tank specs and arena go, and they are still going to be top dog team utility for tank specs in Dragonflight. So that's a big 5 stars. No brainer. As for ease of play, this is a weird one. I would give it 3 stars. The reason I would give it less stars, making it more difficult, is because you have a lot of things you have to go through. You have to sack your teammates, maybe sack CC. You've got to get your CC out. You've got to have targeting macros for everything. You've got to make sure you queens at the right time. You don't want to overlap cooldowns with your teammates. You don't want to overlap Spell Warden with their AMS. You don't want to overlap anything. You got to have these macros. You got to be worrying about your teammates. But when you press one of these buttons, it's so impactful. No matter when you press it, it kind of makes it easier that, okay, if you mess up a bodyguard for a Prot Warrior, that could be pretty damaging. But pressing Queens and making your teammate immune to all damage is always going to be pretty good. Even if there's a slight overlap in there, you just made them immune to all damage. So some of the ease of play comes from how difficult it is to punish certain things that can be that powerful. If you are against a Warlock and a Shadow Priest and you use Blessing of Spell Warden on your teammates, again, right up there, to make them immune to all magical effects, that's going to be good. All they do is magical effects, and you made them immune to it. Wow, that was a good button press, right? So while they do have more mechanics to work with, they're very difficult to punish because they're immunities. They are so powerful. So I would stick it right there in the middle, 3 stars, ease of play. Next, moving on to Guardian Druid, and I have to make a disclaimer here. Remember, this video is a prediction for Dragonflight. It will have nothing to do with pre-patch, and the reason I have to say that is because you yourself have seen pre-patch Guardian Druids running amok right now, doing limitless and unfathomable and unpeelable damage. And that is actually because, thank the Lord, of the pre-patch mechanics. I'll put them right there on the screen. One of them is Legacy of the Sleeper, giving them 50% more damage during their cooldowns. The other one is the Venthyr Covenant ability, which gives them upwards of 30% damage, 60% haste, and crit. Because of the conduits, right, they have so many secondary stats and damage output from Venthyr alone and the Legendary. When you pair those together, that's probably going to cut their damage into a third when they don't have it anymore. So yes, in pre-patch, they would be 40 stars. But as for right now, right up on the screen, I'm going to say 4 stars. Okay? I still think they have a lot of output. Their Moonfires can still chunk people in PvP and Dragonflight, and they'll still have that Thrash PvP talent, so they can still get a lot of cleave out, but it's not going to be anything like what you see right now. In fact, maybe 4 stars is a little high. But that is my prediction here. 4 stars for damage output in Guardian. Really, they just run at you and press Mangle and Maul and Thrash and Moonfire, and they can kind of just ooze damage. It's very, very simple to do, which we know is a star rating on this category, rather, on this video. So we'll get to that in just a second. As for team utility, I'm going to put them right in the middle at 3 stars. They do have Den Mother to give people more health and stamina around them. They have off healing, although they have to shift out of form to do it. And if they get stunned out of form, they could probably take 2 trillion damage because you still take the 60% tank modifier, even in human form. That could be a problem. It's just based on your spec. They do have Demo Roar, which makes people around you take less damage, and that's kind of where it ends, though. They have decent CC, Bash, maybe even the Overrun PvP talent, but nothing too crazy. They're kind of just middle of the pack for that. They don't have any immunities, and their damage reductions are not as plentiful as Prot Warrior, so I would put them right in the middle. It's not terrible, but not the best. Finally, we have ease of play. This is what you guys were probably waiting for. 5 stars. Their rotation just speaks for itself. It's thrash, 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 moonfire, 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 thrash, 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 moonfire, right? That's still what they're going to be doing. They'll add mangles and mauls to that now that the Venthyr and everything is going away, but that's still where they're going to get most of their pressure with those proc moonfires. As for their healing, press frenzy regeneration. And as for their tankiness, be in bear form. And in a PvP environment, because of Incarn and all the power that brings, and just trying to get across the map, shifting routes, and to use your speed against, like, in Twin Peaks or Warsong Gulch when you're playing a rated battleground, really, everything kind of just is built right into the rotation, just like Blood DKs. So you just do your rotation, your thrashes and your moonfires to do damage, and you press your heal to heal, and you run away sometimes if you have a lot of stacks and you're a flag carrier. And you can do that because you can shift into different form and then shift back into bear when they reconnect on you. You have Barkskin and your Survival Instincts wall, and Barkskin can be used in stuns, and it also applies bramble damage. So it's kind of like you're just running in there and you're a tank. And that's what tanks do, and that's what Guardian does. Easy 5 stars for ease of use. And now we have probably the most niche and underplayed tank spec, which is Brewmaster Monk. Certainly in a PvP environment, of course. And but for damage output, I'm giving it 5 stars. Its damage output in PvE right now is one of the highest, and it should actually translate to a PvP environment. You have leg sweep when they're all stacked up, and also that Breath of Fire disorient PvP talent that is really good for pseudo interrupts and keeping people in a pile. It's got a massive range. You'd be shocked if you try this thing out. But yeah, some decent cleave from the Breath of Fire and the throwing kegs and the kicking people. You have really high output. You even have another PvP talent, that Hot Shrub, that can redistribute damage that you've taken or that your teammates have taken. Your output actually should be pretty high if you can get people clumped up. Maybe they pair well with a Blood DK in rated battlegrounds. That would be pretty silly, but who knows? People do funny things, and people try and have fun in this game. Brewmaster output actually should be a 5-star spec. As for team utility, I'm going to put that at a hesitant 3 stars. This is very hard because, again, they're very underrepresented in PvP, but they do have things from their PvP talents like Avert Harm, which allows you to stagger the damage that your team is taking. Also, Purifying Brew, where you can actually just drop that into a team fight, and all of the players in the Purifying Brew radius will not take their next CC effect, so they'll immune it. That's like an AoE Holy Ward. That's really impactful. But outside of that, I mean, they have not a lot of tools. They have Parasweep, and they have that Disorient, so their CC is not bad. They can peel pretty okay with Clash and maybe Disable Root. But that's kind of where it ends. You can Vivify people for some off healing, but it's not a lot. I think 3 stars is a perfect place to put them until we know more about Brewmaster as a whole, but I don't think their team utility can get too much better than that. So 3 stars right there. As for ease of play, I would probably just say 1 star. I think this may be, like I said, the most niche and difficult tank to use well in PvP. Even their inherent tanking rotation is around purifying the stagger and building up stagger. And when you're doing your rotation, you have to take damage and then purify the damage. It kind of requires you to be in, but you don't really want to be in with the 60% damage increase buff that tanks take in PvP. You don't have to deal with that in PvE, so it's kind of bizarre to have them come back in and then try and get out. They have mobility, but again, that's useful for getting out. Sometimes you want to stay in, right? So it's very difficult to know your positioning and where you should be when you have the flag in your hands. And as for team fights, again, getting the most value requires you herding people together, CCing some while stunning and doing damage to the others, and guarding your teammates and purifying a group of people over there. You've always got something and somewhere to be, and your utility is, again, niche. It's like Ring of Peace, knocking people around, maneuverability, purifying Brew, guarding this group, purifying it for damage with Hot Shrub. It's just difficult to say this is anything other than 1 star for ease of play. It's hard to get into. Not a lot of people play Brewmaster for this reason. Finally, we have Vengeance Demon Hunter. And this was the only other tank spec that actually rivaled Guardian in competitive rated battlegrounds for flag carrying duties. So this should be an interesting one. For damage output, I would say a good 4 stars. I think it's really easy for them to get their pressure off, right? They got Immo Aura for cleave. They got Spirit Bomb. They got the Soul Cleave and the Fracture, and they can just get people in a Sigil of Flame. And all of this is elemental damage, meaning it ignores armor. One of the problems that Prot Warriors, maybe even Brewmasters, have an issue with. That elemental damage is really good because your damage output is kind of more consistent, and you don't want it to be low consistent by getting reduced by armor. So you got the fire damage and the shadow damage, the chaos damage. You've got all these effects here. But just really easy AoE to get off, and upfront cleave, on-demand damage. It's all part of Vengeance's tanking rotation. So you'll be doing that while healing yourself, and that's going to be very good for staying in and applying pressure. So easy 4 stars right there for Vengeance Demon Hunter on output in PvP. As for team utility, we're going to give it 2 stars, but with like a 4-star nod to flag carrying. So remember, they're really good at flag carrying like Guardian Druid, where they can just grab the flag and then double leap across the entire map. They can get out of damage and trouble in a snap of their fingers, and that's all you're trying to do. When you're trying to run a flag, you're just trying to get it from one side to the other. And I do have that RBG video that you can take a look at for more information on how things do in rated battlegrounds specifically. But for the team utility, as far as like a team fight or 3s or rated solo shuffle, right, that is a 2 or a 1 star. They have clunky CC, like their Sigil Fear and their Sigil Silence. Illidan's Grasp to stun people and throw them away, that's pretty interesting. But off healing, nope. Damage mitigation, nope. Right? I mean, it really should be 1 star. They don't really have much of a way to support their team at all. Kind of like the same problem Blood DKs have through anything other than peels. They don't have cooldowns for them. They don't have defensives. They don't have buffs for them. They don't have immunities for them. They don't really have any of that at all. So probably just a 1 or a nod to how good they are at flag carrying, but really just for overall team utility in a team fighter arena, it's just 1 star. As for ease of play, I think I would give that a 4 stars. I think they have that sigil mechanic that they have to work around to get the most value out of their spec, but other than that, to move around, you just double leap, and to do damage, you just do your rotation. Again, I said it's upfront cleave that heals you and applies soul fragments that burst and heal you and do damage. It's kind of like the Blood DK school of thought, where you heal yourself with your rotation that does the most damage. You know where to be, you know where to stand, you got to cleave people, it heals you for more, and then if you ever have to get out, leap once, leap twice, and you're gone. Poof. See ya. Take care. You can even leave a fear sigil behind you, so you double leap and they're all feared behind you. They will never touch you again. You are too mobile. Get a life grip on top of that? Jesus, see you later. You're 90 yards away. Crazy. So ease of play, they're definitely doable. Just get that rotation down. Make sure you know how to get out in a moment's notice by just the leap, fear, leap, leap, and you're good. That's all you need to do. 4 stars for ease of play, and that's Vengeance Demon Hunter. All right, that's my video. I didn't really know how this would go or how well received it would be. The only reason I made it is because people told me to. So here it is. If you liked it, or if you had any thoughts what could make it better, or your own ratings, like star ratings and reasons why, put them all in the comments below. Anything you can tell me, that would be very helpful, because I don't really know. I just talked about tanks and PvP from my bajillions of years playing this silly RPG. So if that helped in any way, let me know and I will expand upon it as best as I can. But, you know, feel free to take a look at my other videos on the subjects for pre-patch and for Dragonflight predictions, and let's see how it goes in Dragonflight, if any of this stuff is right on the money or if I missed the mark. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.